Now we're going to look at the thorax and talk about the structures there. So obviously the spine is encompassed within this as well. So I did ask the question early on, you know, which sections produce the most motion. So the cervical and the lumbar spine is where most overall motion takes place in the spine. There is movement at the thorax and within the thoracic spine. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more restricted because of the particular structures that are present in the thorax. So here's when we look at the thorax, so part of the reason why the thoracic spine is somewhat limited in its mobility is because it's where the ribs are. So the ribs attach to the thoracic spine. The other bones of the thorax, if we look here, we have the sternum. So, and the sternum is comprised of three parts. You have the manubrium, the body of the sternum, and then the xiphoid process. Then as we look at the ribs, so the ribs attach at the thoracic vertebrae, and then they come around and they attach. This here is cartilage. So you can see where the bones are. These are the bones of the ribs, and then you have the cartilage in the front. This is called the costal cartilage. So there are 12 ribs in the rib cage. You have the true ribs, which are and they're called true ribs if you look. So ribs 1 through 7 all have direct attachments to the sternum. Okay? Then you have the 5 false ribs. Now, the false ribs are kind of broken up in two different ways. So the false ribs encompass ribs 8, 9, and 10, which still attach to the sternum. However, they don't individually attach to the sternum. They attach by means of a common attachment at the costal cartilage. So all the ribs have cartilage. Here you have this bigger costal arch that ribs 8, 9, and 10 kind of come up to. So again, if we're looking here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 all kind of have direct attachments to the sternum. When you get down to 8, 9, and 10, you notice they kind of all meet up at a common point on the cartilage to then attach to the sternum, okay? Then you have the ribs 11 and 12 are your floating ribs. They don't attach to the sternum at all, okay? So you have the false ribs, and then within that you also have the ribs 11 and 12, which are also floating ribs that have no attachment to the sternum at all. Obviously, the ribs are there to provide for protection for those organs that are present in the thorax. So again, true ribs, ribs 1 through 7, they attach to the sternum via the costal cartilage. False ribs 8 through 10 attach indirectly via costal cartilage of the superior rib. So again, they kind of have that, they refer to it as the costal chondral arch. They kind of all attach there. And then the false ribs, which are called floating ribs, would be ribs 11 and 12. Again, no anterior attachment to the sternum. So we mentioned the thoracic vertebrae. Again, here we're kind of showing these again. So, you know, the thoracic vertebrae, if you kind of look at them. So here you see the important structures here. Here's the lamina, the spinous process. You have your transverse process. The pedicle, which is kind of hidden in here. This is the pedicle, the superior articular facet. Okay, so you have all of these different parts of the vertebrae. You have the body. So the thoracic vertebrae also have attachments for the ribs. So the ribs, you can see here, facet for the rib tubercle. So the ribs actually attach at two different points. They have a point where they kind of articulate with the transverse process, and then they also articulate with the vertebral body. So the ribs actually have two articulations in relation to the thoracic vertebrae. The muscles we're looking at in the thorax are really primarily responsible for the process of respiration. So looking at breathing in or inspiration and then breathing out expiration, these muscles assist with this. Now, it's important to note that during rest, the diaphragm is responsible for breathing. So really the primary driver, if you will, of breathing at rest is going to be the diaphragm. So we have a picture of the diaphragm on the next slide so you could see how it works. But basically, as the diaphragm contracts, it pulls down and allows for lung volume to increase to allow air to be brought in. However, during exercise, we obviously know we need larger amounts of air because our working muscles need more oxygen. So in order to do that, you will get more action from the muscles around there, and you may even bring in some other accessory muscles that could assist with breathing as well. So the muscles that will work during exercise, you have the external intercostals, they expand the chest. The serratus posterior assists with inspiration, and then expiration is going to be assisted by both the internal intercostals and a deep muscle in the abdomen, the transverse abdominis. So I'm looking at the muscles of the thorax. So here you can see the diaphragm. Okay, so the diaphragm is this parachute-shaped muscle that sits at the bottom. Again, we described the mechanism for how that works. So again, this is the muscle that is going to be primarily responsible for breathing at rest. Then you have over here, when breathing has to become a little bit more vigorous, per se with exercise, you have the muscles of inspiration. We're actually showing some other accessory muscles that work as well. So the sternocleidomastoid and the scalenes, if you've ever witnessed somebody doing very labored breathing, you notice the muscles in their neck start to contract more, so they will contribute to breathing as well if the breathing has to become labored or someone's participating in very vigorous exercise. You see the external intercostals, they're going to be responsible for breathing in, and then obviously, again, you have the diaphragm, which will work in both instances. The muscles of expiration, the internal intercostals, and then the abdominal muscles will come in and work as accessory muscles as breathing becomes more labored when you're dealing with expiration. So that wraps up all the different parts of the functional anatomy at the spine. Again, make sure that you look at the readings in your text and look at some of the pictures and diagrams can kind of give you some further exploration of the the bony landmarks in the spine, what the muscles look like from a different perspective as far as the abdominal muscles and the muscles in the back and the spine. And then when we look around at some of the structures in the thorax, it is broken up a little bit, but if you just follow the pages in your syllabus, it should give you what you need to complete that reading.